Hello, everybody. I know you're in conversation, and you... Hi, how are you all? Welcome to the Strand. I'm Jessica Strand, the events director, and no, I am no relation to the Bass family that owns the bookstore. It's just merely a crazy coincidence. Anyway, tonight, I'm thrilled to have partnered with the Poetry Society of America to bring you a series of 3 readings and discussions celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Poetry Society ChapBook Fellowship. Tonight is the second in the series. Here to introduce this evening's poets is Brett Fletcher Lauer, the Deputy Director of the Poetry Society. Brett is the poetry editor of A Public Space. His poems have appeared in American Poetry Review, the Boston Review, Harper's, and Tin House. His first book, Hotel in Belgium, will be released in 2014 from 4 Way Books. Please welcome Brett.
The Poetry Society of America is very happy to be here at the Strand, and I want to thank the Strand and Jessica for welcoming us to this series. And we also have a book display table downstairs where it's Poetry Society of America picks. Working with the 40 chapbook judges and the 40 chapbook winners over the past decade, and I know that's hard to believe because I just got carded for cigarettes, but yes, it's been a decade. Has personally been one of my great pleasures at the Poetry Society, and I think after you hear Hossannah and Kimiko read tonight, you'll have a sense of why I feel so grateful for that. Kimiko Hahn is the author of numerous collections, most recently Toxic Flora and The Narrow Road to the Interior, both published by Norton. She is the recipient of fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the New York Foundation for the Arts, as well as the Poetry Society of America's Shelley Memorial Award. She is a distinguished professor in the English department at Queens College. Hossannah I can't tell me. Asuncion is the author of Fragments of Loss, which was selected by Kimiko Hahn for the 2010 Chapbook Fellowship. And this is the book here. Beautiful. Yeah. Kimiko wrote in the introduction to Fragments of Loss, exploring the outer borough blocks, the wives or rotting bodies, or a pink box, are bits of narrative that have magically broken into lyric. It's a lovely trick to turn fragments into a whole. And so the sequence builds to create a grid of loss, that is, of defeat, bereavement, deficit, damage. Hossannah will read first, then Kimiko, and then they'll have a conversation, which Hossannah will invite you to join. And please welcome Hossannah.
I have an impulse to Instagram this moment, but I won't. Thank you for having me here. This is so exciting. I haven't really looked at this chapbook in a while. Let's see. I don't even know what it's about anymore. I think it's about loss and fragments or something. Prospect Place and Washington Avenue. Prevented from dreaming, the rats were unable to rehearse their survival behaviors. Psychology Today. A bloody bedspread and a chalk outline of him. I lie inside the trace, hand tossed over my head, leg bent awkwardly. I squint, the aura of ceiling light bright behind his head. Like this, I ask? Like this? 8th Avenue and 6th Street. We hid our bodies in the back of closets. Our husbands didn't notice. We didn't know what to make of this. Rotting bodies being rotting bodies, and smells so close to taste. We vomited the dinners we cooked. Our husbands asked, "Are you carrying child?" We answered, yes, maybe. I'm a former Kundiman Fellow, and I had asked the listserv for a healing poem to read today. And Ron, who's sitting in the front, suggested a brief for the defense by Jack Gilbert that I really want to read to you, but I just don't feel like I have it in me. So I'm sorry, but you can look it up. I can send it to you by email. So I'm going to read new poems. Well, no, I'm not. I'm lying, kind of. This is an old poem, but I'll get to the new poems, I promise. This has this is called Manananggal. In Philippine folklore, there's this figure, and so by day she's a beautiful woman, and at night she turns into this monster that flies over the villages. Well, she separates from the bottom half of her body, and then she starts flying, and then she has this tongue that's hollow that she drops down to inside a home, and it slides over to a pregnant woman and slurps the fetus. So those were the kind of images that I grew up with. Here's an epigraph. I had heard so much that these women were very sincere, very loving, very caring, very faithful, and I always had admired Polynesian-type women. I always thought they were very beautiful women. Testimony from Timothy Blackwell while on trial for the murder of his wife, Susanna Remerarta. Susanna, hair down, is sexy dead. Outside my window, the Staten Island volcano turns the southern sky hell. Grabbing her hand, running, the lava reaches us and chars our heels. She cradles her belly. I tell her, "Bungo lang ito." Susanna, hair down, is lovely pregnant. Pulling on Susanna's hand, we run, but lava sears southern Manhattan. Air thickens with exhaust and screams. Manhattan turns into Manila. Susanna collapses. I don't know how to save her. But there is no sadness, only a deep hunger. I am neither poet nor woman, my body halved, legs left behind. I have bat wings. I can sweep us, fly anywhere, but instead, and I can't help it, my hollow tongue rolls from my mouth, slithers towards her pregnant belly, punctures it, and with almost no regret, I consume what would have been a baby girl. A. The rip in my dress is getting bigger. B. What is trying to escape? I'm taking a Cave Canem workshop right now with poet Natalie Diaz, and she made us write Ars Poeticas. So this is very new. I was initially going to read my really rough draft, but I had to. Part of the assignment was to put the poem in couplets, which isn't what I do at all. I'm trying to see if my poems look like this usually. They like to span across the page. Okay. A flesh inkwell sourcing a sweaty wound. Where all our desires, and how do we hide a cell and with agony? There was a turret, I pretended it built alabaster sometimes. I am a beautiful mermaid. I choose to kill the many sailors. I know they were fathers. I know they're sisters. We have glossed each other's lips with melted plastic and then kissed and kissed before the ancestors could find us. Tomorrow is a sin gallivanting. If there's something hidden, it's this. I would give anything for that ride on a swing that made my gullet fill with such joy. There was a dying to be wanted, to die on the end of that happiness, that would be fine. To die from such joy. There is not enough formaldehyde in the world to turn my wicked smile pristine. Come lie with me, I said. I am a snake, but I am your snake. He lie with me, his snake, and we lie and lie, a man and his sexy girl snake. Say something, I say. Pepper, he says. Salt, I say. A lot, he says, and he begins to weep. And I want hands. I want hands to hold his face, to hold his head. There is no way to murder such a red. I know your eyes, I know those eyes, I want to say, like a human, but I'm a snake. I flick my tongue on a nerve, and that is how a snake is smart. The way to turn a crying man into a swollen man, swollen like a snake, finding deep ways in, swallowing a woman whole, so there's nothing left of her, but maybe, just maybe enough strands to build a rope to help rebuild a city, and maybe, just maybe, enough rope left for a swing. A, why didn't you tell me about the fire in the kitchen? B, I wanted you to fail. We are home and hiding inside so much we know the darkness. Cave and the care of it. One of us is daring, inventing spark. Then we invented death. We call it dinner. Then a pilgrimage. We call my home your home. You invent my home more. We have invented debate. I say, no, 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 my home is my home. Then our children invent divorce. It is best we say, this is our fault. But right before the throat tense, the house invents mute. The children invented the button. We were not watching. A, when is it an edge? B, when one of us falls off. In another life, we jumped off a tall tower. We thought we were safe. Gravity not yet invented. In this life, we search endlessly for Lemuria. We push a bone from here, together with a joint from there. Panama, I call it. But naming isn't the same as intimacy. The shores moved further apart. Many generations land-bound before wings break shoulder blade skin. Our gills itch under the patches of fiberglass. The water shudders, reaches for our heat. The ice is melting, and with it, our thirst. A, it's a kiss. B, not without the trouble. I want to pluck the chill from cold gardenias and place it in your hair. I will be what you want of me, shadows of clock hands, the remaining drop in a coffee spoon, anything except cruel. I will take from you the crystals you keep tucked under the parts you think are dying, and I will take from me the bone marrow that makes your lip quiver. Piece together a city for you to live. We can drink wine there. Or I can hold the wine cupped in my hands, and we can wait for light from the sky to cast a reflection of a better world. We can tell this world the stories we've given happy endings to, and spite those fears that make us ashamed of such a simple longing. But you want my story first before I take your picture. They killed the fathers and left us to climb the trees, looking for what remained of them. We climbed high, then climbed higher. We hung from the branches, and to test the ghosts of our fathers, we let go. Some of us lived, the others we harvested like felled avocados. So here, a shot of you with my story in your eyes. This will hold me until you are ready. A, then I'm a ghost too. B. Thank you.
Can you see me over this? Thank you, Poetry Society and Strand. It's lovely to meet Ben in particular after all these years of hearing stories about him from my dad, who loves the Strand bookstore. It's really lovely to meet people through chapbook contest. So I feel very fortunate to have met Hossannah's work and then to meet her in person last year. When was the chapbook? 2011. Time flies. So, and then to read with you now. It's really special. Thank you. I'm actually going to read from a new manuscript that I'm just finishing up now, so if you'll bear with me, it's on the iPad. Although I have to say that when I was sitting there and my eyes were looking at all the books, and in particular I looked at this big dictionary, and as I was looking at it, you know how really old pages feel like velvet on the side? Just, it's like feeling velvety. I'm still unsure of the title of this collection, but most of the poems, as with my last book, Toxic Flora, are triggered by articles, science articles, and mostly from the science section of the New York Times. The difference between this collection and Toxic Flora is that almost always I'll take one article and then write a sequence rather than one article and one poem, although I do that too. So this, I'm going to read a few from the sequence on consciousness, and some have epigraphs, some don't. Alarm. Quote, before doctors learn how it is that the brain's lights turn on, they may have to know a lot more about what's happening when the lights are off. Benedict Carey. In her dark, she surveys empty, the vanity from the in-laws' Bronx apartment, the brooch from a lover, loafers by a coat tree, trench coat, the husband's profile, an alarm for news and forecast. Here, she appraises fidelity before the light violates. Wake. Waking. Canadian geese take flight from pond to field. A school bus idles across the road. My husband fetches wood and lights a fire, even before I hear the electric toothbrush, then his shower. A wanton beeping, his mobile. Yes? Or am I still under a B&B comforter or on some gurney? Does a flicker matter to anyone but the attendant, who watches for awake in muted fluorescence? Porch light. Barley, poppy, the pomegranate, now front porch light. There's no longer sensation without the one once cradled in tissue, swaddled in blood, feeling her hiccup inside the inside. Turn the pages of a calendar to retrieve one's daughter from his underground vow. I must unlock the door, leave it ajar, since, by degrees, the son-in-law rations my weather. And if you like that poem, it's coming out in a public space at some point in the near future. Skull. Little oxygen, no light, no water, certainly no fragrant hands brushing aside one's hair, no novel read until the head nods. Or, yes, the story is how Snow White fled to serve 7 dwarves who, in the end, laid her out in a glass coffin while they read to her in kind, beware the apple bodice comb, the absent father and cannibal mother. Beware the predestined ever after that stays behind in a room of bone. Tiny wheels. Before sunup, the bar below cranks its gate down, and the neighbor's toddler starts up. Come here, not you, I won't, da-da, don't go. Later, in the real morning with real light, you scatter the Sunday paper over our comforter to bolster discomfort. Then again from next door, I hear a matchbox car racing up and down the shared wall. Yes, tiny wheels, from the boy's self-absorbed spell. Or maybe I sensed the subway roaring below the pavement, or the residue of shock, seismic and illicit. This is a random poem, so it's not from the consciousness stuff. In fact, it's from some other brain article. A bowl of spaghetti. To find a connectome, or the mental makeup of a person, researchers experimented with the neurons of a worm, then upgraded to mouse, hoping to unravel the millions of miles of wires in the human brain that they liken to untangling a bowl of spaghetti, of which I have an old photo. Ray in her high chair intently picking out each strand to mash in her mouth. Was she too? Was that sailor dress from Mother? Did I cook that sauce from scratch? If so, there was a carrot in the pot, as Mother instructed, and I'll never forget, no matter which strand, determines ardor as a daughter's verdict. It's another random poem. Turns of mind. 5,000 blackbirds fall from the sky, not mid-fairy tale, but news at 6. Once established, neither army test nor pesticide are at fault. The mind races for causative agents in case we are next. Ah, did the flock soar into some invisible divide from another dimension, a la Twilight Zone? Did the flock cross an exacting God? A ranger suggests coincident firework explosions flushed the birds at such speed they crashed into buildings and power lines, and in fact, necropsies do disclose blunt force trauma to brain and breast. Even so, since pyrotechnics are not sufficiently ominous, the blogosphere keeps alive a quest for the fabulous. I'm going to read a few poems from the Dream Theory section. The Dream of Parsnips. Oh, and for this, if anybody's interested, for this, I wasn't exactly blocked at the time, but I didn't think I was going to work on any more science poems. So I thought, oh, what the heck? That's what I keep writing about anyway, or using as a trigger. So I gave myself an assignment, and these dream theory poems, these dream poems were the first of the neuroscience sequences I ended up writing. So for these, Ron knows about this, I gave myself a little assignment. The poems had to be under a certain number of, like under 20 lines. They had to have some sort of repeating phrase, and I had to have a quote in there somewhere. So anyway, The Dream of Parsnips. Do I wish for a box of cigars or dynamite? Do I wish for the sudden squirming of earthworms? Do I wish for the dense smell in Grandma Ida's dining room, or some prefix? Do I wish for the standing outside his lit office window at 2 a.m, as only a sophomore can stand? Or for the husband to scrap the skank? Or perhaps for the researcher herself who believes that dreaming is not a parallel state, but consciousness itself in the absence of the senses' input? Considering various explanatory projects, I do wish that wishing would process whatever calls up an object so white and duplicitous. This next dream poem makes reference to a Fiji mermaid. A Fiji mermaid is this thing, this creature that people like P.T. Barnum used as a sideshow exhibition, saying that it was, come and see the Fiji mermaid, but actually it was the torso of a monkey, the top half of a monkey sort of stitched or glued or whatever to the bottom of a fish. So it's like this weird desiccated thing that was supposed to be a mermaid. Anyway, that's longer, the explanation's longer than the poem. The dream of a letter opener in the shape of a mermaid. Tell me which ocean is warmest. Tell me which shore is closest. Tell me which ship crosses, tosses, trash, and which plays a waltz, and how many bottles you've collected containing messages from shipwrecks. Is this figure playing in my mind an unconscious desire or archetypal theme, or are these explanations merely predetermined ideas, assumptions made science? Not wishing to jam the round peg in that square, I also don't wish to submit to gastrointestinal or neurological pleasures. Tell me about the sister in a glass case, a monkey's body glued to that of a fish. The dream of a knife, fork, and spoon. I don't have my patter worked up yet for in between the poems, so oh well. The dream of knife, fork, and spoon. I can't recall where to set the knife and spoon. I can't recall which side to place the napkin, or which bread plate belongs to me, or how to engage in benign chatter. I can't recall, when more than one fork, which to use first, or what to make of this bowl of water. I can't see the place cards or recall any names. The humiliation is impressive. The scorn. No matter how much my brain revises the dinner to see if the host was a family member, I can't recall which dish ran away with which spoon. You're a hard audience. That's supposed to be kind of funny. I'm going to have to rewrite that. The terrible-headed lizard from the Orient. Far from my grade school Golden Book of Natural History, with its illustration of the ancient reptile Proterosaur, I see that paleontologists have unearthed more fossils. Now they realize that those monstrous necks, twice as long as their 3-foot trunks, might have been functional. That 200 million years ago, hunting in ancient seas was tough, since any quick movement pushed their prey off. Turtles and fish solve this same dilemma with suction feeding, that is, by rapidly expanding the mouth cavity. And apparently, so did the terrible-headed lizard from the Orient, which presents a greater illustration of nightmare than I ever knew, since their long necks evolved into a giant suction tube, you. I just made fun of you all. I thought that erasures were kind of trendy, and so I didn't ever do any of them. And then finally I did, and I'm just obsessed with erasures now. So I do have one somewhere in here. I have a couple. And my, what I tell myself is that the erasure should not be about what the article is about. Erasing host manipulation. Not all kill their hosts. Think of the morgue providing room and board. Some migrate to their host's brain where they manage to rewire neurons. It may be distressing to those committed to autonomy, but invaders ask, what about the daily, diseased lives most of us experience? Hosts, Buddhists note, know about the apple, know about the pineapple or the yellow, but are absorbent and porous are we. And I will end with cherry stems. I'm not too happy that fruit flies have brains, since I swat them whenever I see them or think I see them. I know about their brains because I met a scientist who tinkers with their learning circuitry, the actual mechanics of how a memory trace is laid down in a nerve cell or neuron. All this proxy, dissecting the behavior of an insect, to figure out how the brain works, for something like typing, at which my mother was a pro, and me fairly miserable because of some disorder, which it seems my daughter has inherited, since she also exhibits left-right confusion. However, she can twist a cherry stem into a bow with her tongue, an ability no doubt from an ancestral brain, but which also reveals something about a summer in Florence. In other words, too much information regarding memory trace. Thank you.
So I thought I'd try something new and have the idea of Q&A instead of actually having fully formed questions, which was a really wrong idea because now I'm nervous. But I wanted to, background to sort of the start of this is I'm taking that workshop that I mentioned earlier, and in the middle of class during an exercise, I felt like my head was going to explode at a certain point, which was familiar, but I think it was the first time I was really conscious of having a physical relationship with writing. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to pose a question to you. I read an interview where you said, words for me are tools. I could almost taste them in my mouth. I could almost feel the texture of words in my mouth. So it's both a delight in the medium and also in the need for song. Can you talk more about your process in terms of like feeling a poem physically, how it starts out in your body and how it becomes something on the page?
My earliest memories of language really has to do with the delight in just hearing words, even words that I had no idea what they meant, just even place names from Rudyard Kipling's Just So stories. Just the language was just so beautiful and it was fun to say. So it just delighted me as a child, and in the sense of attaching words and delight has always stayed with me. But also, I also tend to like diction that is very textured. So, a lot of consonants and consonants. These days, a lot of slant rhyme. I think that's one reason why I love the Science Times so much. First of all, I was not a very good science student, so the realm of science for me is very exotic, right? Japanese culture would be exotic to somebody else, not me. Science is exotic, and the language is very textured in my mind. So you can feel it. You can see how textured a poem is without even reading it, and I love that. I love that relationship to it, and I try and write very freely until I kind of hit a nerve. Because if I don't do that, why would anybody else care? So sort of different ways of having a physical relationship to the poem. How about you?
Well, my head was exploding. I like
Emily Dickinson That Emily Dickinson, when she knows it's a poem when her head blows off her head, right?
Well, I wanted to talk about chapbooks because you're such a supporter of the chapbook, and the chapbook as an object, and we're surrounded by beautiful objects right now. Can you talk about your love of the chapbook?
I can talk about my love of the chapbook. I had a really ignorant moment about 6 years ago. I was reading some bios in the back of a literary journal, and over the course of, say, several months, I just noticed that a lot of emerging writers were saying in their bios in the literary journals, finalist for thus and such chapbook. And I thought, this is me being ignorant, I thought, really? You're going to say you're a finalist for a chapbook contest? And then I got kicked in the butt because I realized at that point that I was the one who was, that I was really ignorant about the importance of chapbooks in general, and certainly for this generation of writers, new generation of writers, present and upcoming. And once I realized the depth of that importance, I got involved with some CUNY comrades and also literary friends and organizations, Brett, and at that point, Rob Casper and Alice Quinn, and we talked to some other literary organizations, and we started the first chapbook festival at the Grad Center. And this is our 5th year?
Yeah.
It's our 5th year. And it just makes me so happy. And I'm putting my poetry where my mouth is, and I have 3 chapbooks and another one coming out.
Yeah, no, I love chapbooks. It's part of my process in terms of, my words have to become physical at some point. I feel like that's the only way I'm really finished with a work, is when I have an object to give someone else. That being said, chapbooks also, they're subversive to me. And as a published poet, how is it, how do you think it's, how would you say it's an alternative space for people to go to in terms of, as an alternative to what publishing is now for poets?
Well, I think it's always been an alternative space, a kind of outlaw space, which I really love. I think people can take more risks there. There's all sorts of market concerns in publishing. I mean, when you get a book when you get a manuscript taken, one of the first things that the publisher will ask you is, where are you going to market this? Like, where am I going to market this? Well, yeah, actually, it's poetry. Market is very important, and I understand. Of course, it's capitalist economy and country and all of that. But so that means that the place to take risks, as always, is outside that particular marketplace. I think there's probably more to say, but I can't think of anything else.
Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about community, because you've been such an ally for Kundiman, and I think you were the first connection in terms of connecting Kundiman to the Poetry Society. Well, like me,
Yes,
and then
I'll take that.
In terms of being a single body, how is it in your consciousness when you're writing and when you're putting things together to make connections in community? Like how? Well, I guess, and not in a marketing sense, but can you talk maybe about as in what ways is having community going against the sort of insular nature of being a poet?
Well, I write for myself first. I mean, I just write for the blank page and for myself. And then, because I try not to think when I write. And then during the revision process, that's when I bring my brain back in. I don't think I consider audience or marketing, and maybe I'm kidding myself, till way later. A number of my books have had sort of themes. They seem like idea books, which have been popular for well over a decade. But that's really because I'm an obsessive person, and when I'm writing over a period of time, I tend to just organize my thoughts in that way. So it looks like, oh, now I'm going to write Toxic Flora. But I didn't set out to do that. I didn't set out to write another science book. In fact, I was trying not to. So in terms of writing for a community, I don't really do that. And as a young woman, when I was much more involved in politics and in grassroots organizations, I was around a lot of political people who were not sectarian when it came to culture. In other words, if I were to read a poem at a benefit for homeless people, let's say, it didn't need to be a political poem. It could be a love poem, which in fact would be very political because homeless people don't have privacy. So that my relationship to community is through me and how I connect and context. And my poetry, I can find ways of connecting it, but I don't write for a particular community, I think. I mean, probably unconsciously I do. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. I'm going to just ask easy questions now. Favorite word? Well, since you were talking
favorite
about
word? Linoleum.
Linoleum.
How about you?
I'm divided between two words, feral and umami.
Okay, then I'm going to say razor.
Oh, but we're doing that game.
We'll hand it around the room.
Favorite word. Favorite word, Eugenia.
Periwinkle.
That's a good word.
I have words I don't like. Mayonnaise.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, because you say it mayonnaise, or because what if someone says it mayonnaise?
Same.
Same.
Mayo?
Is there a phrase that's kind of, because of the music of it, that's stuck in your head right now? Or a lyric, or a music sense? I don't know.
Oh, whenever anybody asks me that or what I'm reading now, I always draw a blank. I'm teaching Emily Dickinson now, though, so it would have to be something from Emily Dickinson, but it's not popping out of my head, except for there's a certain slant of light. That line, that one little tiny line, but it would be something from Emily Dickinson.
Do you have something memorized that you don't struggle with in terms of remembering it? Like, you were talking about Emily Dickinson. The one poem that I have memorized is an Emily Dickinson poem. Oh, no.
Yeah, see, I'm not going to try either. I thought you said this was the easy part.
I thought it was going to be easy. Let's see. This is where I wish I had the prepared questions. Okay. Oh, really? Okay. want to ask about the book as an object, and I'm trying to figure out how to frame it. When you first pick up, do you have a ritual with picking up a book or choosing a book? And you were talking about the feel of paper being like velvet. Maybe you could talk about that when you're wandering a bookstore and something catches your eye and makes you want to touch this book.
Well, I'm very visual. I come from a family of artists, so the way an object looks, books or otherwise, is important to me. But when I pick a book up, I usually will just flip through and see if the language is textured.
What do you mean? The way it looks on the page, or?
Yeah, the way it looks on a page, or just sort of skimming over the diction and seeing if I'm attracted that way first.
Mm-hmm.
So otherwise, it's a lot by hearsay.
Mm-hmm.
What other people are reading and what they think I should read. Mm-hmm. I read a lot of actually nonfiction, like weird nonfiction.
I'm reading Eddie Huang's memoir right now. I can't remember the title. He's a food person. He's not a chef. Anyway, I don't know. Let's see.
Well, I'm wondering if anyone in the audience would like to ask you a question?
I have a question.
Oh, good.
I was wondering about the A and B sequence that you were reading, and I know in the chapbook there's a whole section called narrated by other. So if that's a kind of continuation of a narrative structure, or how those are functioning in between the poems, or if they're titles, or how they are working.
Well, they started off as looking. I have a folder in Google Docs called Scraps, and it was going through them and just really wanting them to be real poems, and so just started doing this series. And when I do readings, it felt like a good breath in between longer poems. I don't know how they fit. I haven't really thought of them in how they form or are part of a manuscript at all. I like dialogue, so it's one way to play with that.
Pacing, yeah, I like the notion of pacing as you go along.
I can project. Both of your poems come from very personal. They seem very personal to me. And both of your writing, your love of science and love of words, and your experience, it seems very personal. But have either of you ever written successfully in your minds a poem about something that you've never experienced, or something that seemed separate from you at first that you were able to find through poetry?
Well, I've never been a monster.
That's a really good answer, actually.
or a snake. No, I am a snake, actually. It's my Chinese astrology sign. Now I'll have to think about it.
Well, I use a lot of, I always have used a lot of outside material and research material. So in a way, I'm constantly getting into trouble by writing about things I know absolutely nothing about, like black lung disease, pneumoconiosis, or naming planets, or something like that. I mean, I'm just constantly doing that. and that's really fun. So, but yeah. Does that make sense?
I suppose, I mean, do you think you have to have experienced despair to write about it, or experienced love, or experienced fear? I mean, everyone has these feelings, but sometimes, do you think that it's something you have to have gone through to write about or to explore? I mean, in terms of like, I don't know. I mean, personally, for you guys. I mean, people can, but I mean, for you as poets, is it something that like?
I'd say yes, or else, because if I'm going to hit a nerve, then it's going to be from my own emotional experiences. And that's just going to come up naturally. I mean, that's my writing process. I don't know about other people. So why would they want to read something I've written if it isn't moving in some way? I mean, I really believe that for myself, for my own. That's what I strive for in my own writing. And what was the other part of your question? If you haven't experienced something?
Yeah, I just meant, my friend once tried to write a poem about a dead hooker in a trunk, but and how sad she was about that, but she couldn't access that because she was from a small town in Georgia, and things like dead hookers and drug addiction and stuff were so far from her. But she was also very young at the time. And so, I mean, is it something that, like, or, if you write a poem about, I don't know, I just meant for you to write a poem, or for you especially to write a poem.
Yeah. Well, see, there's a difference between the subject matter and then the emotion. Because you can write about a dead hooker in a trunk, but what is the person's stake in writing about that? What is the emotional connection? The poet A.I., who passed away a few years ago, she wrote almost all persona poems, dramatic monologues. But she would write about, from the point of view of a serial killer who killed children, but she'd write about it, for example, this particular one, The Good Shepherd, she wrote from the point of view of the serial killer after he had murdered and dumped the bodies, and he wanted a cup of hot chocolate. Well, we all know what that's like, to want a cup of something hot. So there was this weird way of connecting to this monstrous person, and it was fascinating. And that kind of desire for comfort, but also to be really large and be recognized. So that's how she would connect to it. She'd find some way in.
Yeah, I really think it's the capacity of the artists, an artist's level of capacity to reach into the specificity of a moment. Does that make sense? That almost didn't make sense to me. Yeah, I mean, I think that we're all kind of, we share truths, and but there's how we design them. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. How we fabricate these universal feelings. The Manananggal is actually part of a trilogy of poems, and I did write from Timothy Blackwell's point of view. That series made me crazy. I went crazy when I wrote it. I was just reading everything. I went to the New York Public Library and was like it was really awesome to work with microfiche, but I was going crazy, like just because I was trying to write from his point of view and really kind of just reading everything. Yeah, no, I went crazy. So maybe that's it. You have to go crazy to be able to write about something. No, don't follow my direction.
Hello. I loved both of your readings, firstly. And also, I was going to ask, this is a question for both of you, but you both kind of talk about experimenting with different forms and with different kind of, almost you were saying when you had this block, you kind of deliberately sought out a new, and kind of gave yourself this task to push you to maybe write in a different style. And I was wondering, do you find that kind of pushing yourself out of your maybe your comfort zone of what you usually tend to gravitate towards writing is helpful? And also, does it make maybe coming back to what you maybe feel is more natural to you to write? Does it change that process in any way? Does that make sense?
I pretty much, after decades, have a kind of style of what I want to do with lyric poems in particular. But I still need to trick myself sometimes in order to move forward, even though I know there's certain things that I want to do with the line and with the stanza. So there's certain things that I just trick myself into doing. On the other hand, I also write using Japanese forms. So those are different from my lyric poems, like in Toxic Flora and what I was reading this evening. And those are really fun. And it's a totally different mindset. And when I use those forms in a craft class, it kind of makes people crazy because it's a very different way of thinking, and it is for me too, because I'm Western, but I have a lot of Japanese aesthetics and sensibilities. So it's interesting actually to go between all these different forms, kind of lyric that I've been hammering out for myself, and then also these other strange creatures. You're doing the Q&A thing, and then the long poems and so forth, the trilogy.
I think I give myself projects, and they're very short because I have a short attention span. That I can only crochet like beanies. I won't ever be able to make a blanket. So that's how I think I am with writing projects. The chapbook is a writing project. It was a project after grad school. That's how it came about. I was trying to write fiction, but then this is what came out of it. I was trying to write sentences. I'm still trying to write sentences. I'm like, who laughed? Was that you, Rico? He's a sentence writer. The projects that, right now, I'm researching Philippine mythology. They're also dark. The Manananggal gives a sense of how like terrified all the children are in the Philippines. There's another, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a name given for babies that die before they're baptized. It's just, and I'm trying to find a way to use Philippine mythology to explain my family's mythology. My father was my father's father. During the Japanese occupation of the Philippines, he was taken and he never came back. And so he's been this mythological figure. And I'm trying to find a way to write my family's story using these Philippine mythological figures. And that's really exhausting for me to think about, but it's fun to read these stories. So that's a project. I don't know what's happening yet with that. But I feel like it may take some similarities of the Manananggal poem that I read today.
One last question, anyone? No? All right, Kimiko Hahn, thank you so very much for coming by.